It started like a celebration meant to last all summer, but in the blink of an eye, it turned into heartbreak. Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull, two of Caitlin Clark's closest allies, stepped forward with an announcement that silenced the basketball world. Clark, the generational talent and the face of the Indiana Fever, was pulling out of the 2025 WNBA All-Star Weekend, and not by choice. What had begun as a season of triumph was now clouded with questions, uncertainty, and a gut punch to the very heart of Indianapolis. The timing made it all the more devastating. Just days earlier, Clark had stood under the lights, accepting the WNBA Player of the Year award. She was the captain of the All-Star game, the clear favorite in the three-point contest, the one player the entire city was waiting to see. Then, suddenly, nothing. No shooting showcase, no game day heroics, just an empty roster spot and a wave of disbelief that swept across the league. Fans weren't just shocked. They were grieving. For Cunningham and Hull, the announcement wasn't just about the game. It was deeply personal. The three had forged something rare in professional sports, a genuine, unshakable friendship that carried them through the grind of the season. And now, they were watching their leader, their sister, forced to step away at the very peak of her momentum. The silence from the court was deafening. But behind the scenes, the emotion was explosive. This wasn't just a missing star player. This was the heartbeat of the Fever, the anchor, the lightning rod, the woman who had brought a city back to life with every pull-up three, every no-look pass, every fearless drive into the paint. But the story didn't end with Clark's announcement. It deepened. Sophie Cunningham's voice carried the weight of someone trying to hold a teammate's spirit intact while struggling to keep her own emotions in check. Lexie Hull, normally composed and reserved, let herself be vulnerable in a way fans rarely see, speaking openly about the pain of Clark's absence, not just for the team, but for the game. The air in Indiana wasn't just tense. It buzzed with uncertainty. And yet, even in that moment, there was a sense this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a larger story, because when you strip away the banners, the trophies, the media frenzy, what you're left with is a brutal question that haunts every great athlete. What happens when your body says stop, but your heart still screams go? That was the reality Caitlin Clark was facing. For the Fever, this wasn't just about one game or one weekend. It was about something far more important: protecting a legacy that was still being written. The stakes had never been higher. Indianapolis had prepared for a coronation, every seat sold, every hotel booked, her face on every billboard. The three-point contest, she was the one to beat. The All-Star game, she wasn't just playing, she was leading. This was supposed to be her moment, the moment the rest of the basketball world bowed to a new queen. Instead, it became a gut-wrenching reminder of how fast everything can change. It had started like any other high-stakes Fever game, fast-paced, tense, the crowd roaring with every touch. Clark was locked in, darting across the floor, eyes always on the rim. And then something shifted. Subtle at first, so subtle that only those watching her every move could spot it. A slight hesitation in her stride, a grimace quickly swallowed. A hand brushing her side just a little too long. On the broadcast, the commentators kept talking, unaware of the storm quietly brewing. But courtside, fans exchanged glances. This wasn't fatigue. This was something else, possession after possession. She seemed to fade, her energy draining with every play. She wasn't calling for the ball like usual. She was conserving, holding back. And for someone as fiercely competitive as Clark, that was alarming. Midway through the quarter, the truth could no longer be hidden. Clark winced openly, her face contorting in pain after a drive to the hoop. The crowd, once thunderous, began to quiet. Something was wrong. She finished the possession, but she wasn't playing anymore. She was enduring. The timeout whistle blew. And then it happened. Clark didn't jog to the bench. She limped. Teammates rushed to her side. Sophie Cunningham reached out first, steadying her with one hand on her shoulder, her jaw tight, her expression unreadable. Lexie Hull followed, eyes locked on their teammate, worry written across her face. By the time Clark sat, she was clutching, her side, knuckles white against her jersey. The trainer leaned in, speaking low. Around her, the atmosphere had changed completely. The noise that had once filled the arena had vanished. You could hear the squeak of sneakers, the low hum of the PA, but not much else. Even the announcers hesitated, their voices dipped. No one knew exactly what had happened, but everyone knew something had. When the halftime buzzer sounded, the Fever formed a tight circle around their star and walked her into the tunnel. Reporters craned their necks for a glimpse. Fans stood, frozen. It had been a celebration. Now, it felt like a vigil, and for Caitlin Clark, it marked the start of a battle no one could fight for her. Hoping for a glimpse, fans lingered by the locker room tunnel, but the message was unmistakable. This was private. Inside, the atmosphere was far from the usual mid-game adjustments. This wasn't about strategy or X's and O's anymore. This was about Caitlin. Clark sat on the trainer's table, her jersey untucked, sweat rolling down her face. The medical team moved with calm urgency, voices low as they ran through evaluations, stretching her leg, applying pressure, watching for reactions. Every flinch told its own story. This wasn't a cramp. This wasn't something that would go away in 5 minutes. Sophie leaned against the wall, arms folded tight, her eyes never leaving Clark. The protective instincts she'd always carried were written all over her face. Lexie sat nearby, slowly untying her shoes, glancing over every few seconds like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Then the trainer delivered the words no one wanted to hear. Aggravated groin injury, manageable, if handled carefully. Dangerous if pushed. With All-Star Weekend only days away, the question shifted. No longer how well would Caitlin Clark perform, but would she perform at all? The answer, though no one said it out loud, was already forming in her mind. The Fever's PR team urged her to hold off. Give it a day, see how it feels in the morning. But Clark knew better. She'd been in tune with her body her entire life. She could feel the line she was approaching, and this time pushing through. Wasn't heroic. It was reckless. Sophie caught her eye and gave a small, stern shake of the head. Don't even think about it. Lexie didn't say a word, but her gaze spoke volumes. Understanding, support, and quiet heartbreak. Clark made her decision without ceremony. No long explanation, no drama. Just a quiet statement to the staff. She was withdrawing. No three-point contest, no all-star game. No dazzling entrance under the lights in front of a sold-out home crowd. The decision was hers, but it felt like a loss she could measure. Still, even in her disappointment, Clark promised she'd show up in spirit. She would attend the events. Cheer from the sidelines, be present for her teammates, even if she couldn't share the court. A small win in a moment that felt like defeat. For Sophie and Lexie, it wasn't surprising. It was confirmation. Caitlin wasn't just a player. She was a leader, someone who understood that legacies are built over seasons, not weekends. When the news hit social media, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Fans flooded her accounts with love, support, and sorrow. Media outlets scrambled to rework their all-star narratives. And inside the Fever, something began to shift. The spotlight wasn't going to shine on Caitlin this time. It was the team's moment now. Lexie Hull, always dependable, but often just out of the limelight, was called in to take Caitlin's spot in the three-point contest. It was a bittersweet honor. Statistically, she was more than qualified. One of the best shooters in the league, her form was machine-like in its consistency. But what the public didn't know was that Lexie was already grieving a different kind of loss, one that had nothing to do with basketball. Maggie, the dog who had been by her side for 14 years through championships, heartbreaks, and quiet off days, had passed just days earlier. She posted the news quietly, just a few pictures and a short caption. No spotlight, no press. The outpouring of support was immense, but it was the replies from Sophie and Caitlin that mattered most. Sophie's message carried the ache of shared grief. Caitlin's reply was brief, but deeply personal. This wasn't teammates sending perfunctory condolences. This was love. This was family. In a league often defined by box scores and headlines, the Fever were quietly building something different. They were showing the world what it means to carry each other through the kinds of moments that don't make the stat sheet. The moments that matter more. Sophie Cunningham's role in all of this was impossible to overlook. Known for her fire and toughness, she had long been the defender you wanted in your corner. Earlier in the season, when Clark took a hard hit from an opposing player, Sophie didn't wait for the refs. She stepped in immediately. It cost her a fine, but it earned her something far more valuable, the unwavering respect of Fever fans. That loyalty didn't stop on the court. She was just as present for Lexie in her quiet pain, checking in, showing up, making sure her teammate didn't feel alone. Sophie became the emotional anchor, the glue, the kind of presence every team dreams of having, but few actually find. Fans noticed. They gave the trio a nickname, Tres Leches, a nod to dessert, playful and sweet, but also fitting. Three distinct personalities blending into something memorable. Clark, the star; Cunningham, the protector; Hull, the quiet warrior. Together, they weren't just teammates. They were a story, and that story wasn't born from convenience. It was forged in long practices, grueling travel, shared meals, and moments of real vulnerability. Sophie came to Indiana hungry after her Phoenix run. Lexie brought her Stanford precision, and when Clark joined, something clicked. They didn't just play together, they chose each other. They protected one another through every high and low. The season could throw at them. So when Clark had to step back, the group didn't fall apart. They leaned in. Roles shifted, but the trust held. The Fever didn't collapse without their star. They adapted. They fought. And they stayed together. What started as a devastating setback could very well become the defining moment of their season. Because sometimes, the real victories aren't measured in points or trophies or headlines. Sometimes they're measured in the quiet strength it takes to keep going, for yourself and for each other. Victories aren't always reflected on the scoreboard. They live in the bonds you build, the people you protect, and the moments when the game pauses but the love keeps going. For Clark, Cunningham, and Hull, that's the legacy they're building. One heartbeat, one sacrifice, one step forward at a time. Even as the Fever pushed through the season, there was an unshakable feeling that this story wasn't finished. What fans saw, the chemistry on the court, the post-game hugs, the inside jokes in interviews, was only the surface. They didn't see the late-night phone calls, the quiet drives home after a loss, or the silent promises exchanged with a glance across the locker room. Sophie, Caitlin, and Lexie weren't just surviving, they were preparing to rise. And not just as individuals, but as a unit forged in loyalty. Clark, sidelined but far from absent, transformed into something few expected, a voice of clarity and leadership from the bench. She wasn't checked out or sulking. She was locked in, watching plays unfold, whispering advice to younger players, calling out defensive rotations, offering encouragement after every turnover. Every made shot from the Fever bench became a moment of celebration for her. She stood up, clapped, shouted, smiled. Even without a jersey on, her presence was felt. It wasn't about being the star anymore. It was about being the soul. For Sophie Cunningham, The moment became a mirror. With Clark's offensive dominance off the floor, Sophie leaned into her role as the team's fire starter. Defense became her language and passion her weapon. She barked out matchups, slapped the floor, dove into scrums for loose balls like every possession could shift the season. She didn't lead with words, she led with example. Her grit reminded everyone what Indiana basketball had always been about: heart, hustle, and fighting for the player next to you. Lexie Hull's transformation happened in quieter ways. Still grieving the loss of Maggie, the dog who had been her silent support system through so much of life, she poured that aching